Let's talk about the highlights of the 2024 Mountain West football schedule.
College football is always in the news, so we're back on the big mountain to keep you updated.
Hey, it's great to have you back here on the mountain. I am JY, and this is my good friend Steve. Steve, we finally got our football schedule for the Mountain West. I've been waiting for this sucker, but it took them a little bit longer because they approved that agreement with Washington State and Oregon State, so they had to figure all of that out a little bit. So finally was posted last week, and I want to just go over some highlights. We're not going to go over all of it in detail. We are going to do team previews for every Mountain West team come summertime. We're also going to do kind of a conference summary of where things are going to be at probably early August as we get closer to the season. But we finally got some football news here, and we got to get into it. So I'm going to go over every week, and kind of I picked out some of the games that really kind of stood out to me here. We're going to do a separate episode on Washington State and Oregon State, just for them, just for some of our Pac fans, and also I don't want to commingle this quite much. You heard me mention them a few times here, but we're going to do a standalone just for the Pac-12 teams here. So let's start with August 31st. I breezed past August 24th, that week zero stuff. Yeah. Nothing there really interesting to me. So let's get into August 31st. I got two games, and these first couple weeks I'm picking several games because got a lot of out-of-conference stuff. Really going to set up the conference for kind of like we're seeing in basketball. If you can have a strong out-of-conference schedule as a conference, it elevates your whole conference here. So I'm picking out some here that I think are going to be really important to the Mountain West if we want to try and grab that one playoff spot. So I pulled out Boise State at Georgia Southern here. Boise should win this game, but do they? And by how much do they, right? I think this is a telltale sign for Boise. We saw what happened to them early last season. They struggled out of the gate, came on really hard at the end, but they can't, if they're going to push for this spot in the college football playoffs, you can't have a slow start. And my goodness, they have two really important games early on. So you're going to hear me talk about Boise in week 1 and week 2. But week 1, they travel to Georgia Southern, and they have got to take care of business against that team. Yeah,
I was just going to say that's Boise State. They're a different team on the blue carpet than they are off the blue carpet, and going down there, that humidity, that time of year, playing at Georgia. They're in that Pacific Northwest. That could be a little challenge. They should beat them. They should handle business, but that could be an early season challenge with the humidity and stuff.
If they have a hiccup there, it's over.
Yeah,
I mean that's how intense this is right from the get-go. You've got to come out swinging. So the other one that I have here is Wyoming traveling to Arizona State. You remember last year, Fresno just mopped the floor with Arizona State down there. We're going to see, again, as I said before, I'm going to be pretty high on the Cowboys here. And I think they need to keep this as a close game. It's got to be a very competitive game. Win-lose, I'm not sure yet. I'm not quite that far into the season yet. But again, for both the Pokes and for the conference, this is a big game for them. Mm-hmm. Looking at September 7th, week 2, we've got Boise State at Oregon. Very tall test here for Boise. Not necessarily expecting a win, but how can they compete against an Oregon Ducks team that I think is going to be really strong again? Going to the Big Ten. We'll see what happens. So 2 big games out of the gate for Boise.
I would say so. Last year for Boise, and you kind of touched on this. They have played that close game against UCF early in the season, and for that last spot, that power, the group of 5 spot in the college football playoff, that's a lot of that is about national perception,
right?
National buzz, and really, it was a close game to UCF. I remember it's like a 2-point game or something. Losing that game, that set the national perception that this is not Boise's year. There's no matter what Boise did going back into the Mountain West, they could have been undefeated the rest of the way through, won the Mountain West title. I think that national perception was set right away the first or second game of the year against UCF.
And converse that with the Pokes, right? Where they have that big win, upset win against Texas Tech. Huge. They go down to Texas and play right there with them for 3 quarters. It got away in the 4th quarter. And I'm not saying it gave them national prominence that they're going to be a top 25 team. It didn't give them that. But it certainly set the tone that, oh my gosh, this Cowboy team, they upset Texas Tech and they played with Texas for a while, and I know if there's any Texas fans watching, there's gobs of excuses why that happened. It doesn't matter. The fact that they came out of that with a very close game for 3 quarters is what a lot of people saw. So
yeah, and Boise with that matchup against Oregon is a lot like the
Yes.
Wyoming, Texas. For Boise to beat Oregon, that's hard to really ask for. I mean,
Sure.
it could happen, but if they can play competitive and show they belong on the same field, unlike Liberty last year, who got the freaking G5 spot and just crapped all over themselves. If Boise can show, hey, we belong on the same field with these guys.
Exactly.
Maybe they're 2 touchdowns better than us, but we can compete.
Yep. The other one I got to pull, week 2 here, we've got Air Force at San Jose State, so an in-conference game already. And I'm anxious to see this game for both of these teams. You saw what Air Force did to start the season last year, then things just kind of got away from them. I personally think they got some injuries. They're not the big, bulky guys that the other teams have, especially on the front line when you want to run the ball. But I'm anxious to see Air Force, how they start the season, and I'm anxious to see San Jose State and the turnover that they have had. What are they going to look like? A huge matchup, September 7th in the Mountain West already.
I'm going to make a prediction.
Okay.
Air Force, you're saying Air Force playing San Diego State.
San Jose State.
Oh, San Jose State. I'm going to make the prediction early in the season that Air Force is going to run the daggone ball 50 times and run all over them. That's my early lock.
We'll see. Oh, it's your early lock.
They're going to run for over 200 yards.
Pulling out the ice cold locks
San Jose
already.
State, yeah.
All right, so let's go to September 14th. Got to pull this one out. CU at CSU. So the Buffaloes going to the Rams. We all know what happened last year in that game. A wing dinger that the Rams almost pull the upset off. Now this year they go back to Colorado State. I'm anxious for this game. We'll see what happens there. I of course have to pull that game into the talk. The other one, another interstate game here. We got Utah going to Utah State. Utah State, a team, if they can solidify their defense, they've got a hell of an offense. They're returning quite a few. I'm not saying they're going to beat Utah, but, I got to pull these interstate rivalries or interstate schools when they're playing each other. So September 14th, we got the Colorado teams, we got the Utah teams. 2
huge games, not only for the Mountain West and how the standings are going to come out, but huge as far as national perception.
Yeah.
2 Mountain West teams against 2 teams that went to the Big 12. They think they're special, they think they're great, yada yada yada. This is a huge opportunity for the Mountain West to if they could get upsets in one or both of those games, big statement maker.
Let's go to September 21st. Nothing really stuck out here. I did pull out CSU versus UTEP. So UTEP coming up to Colorado State. Only because, again, to get back to what I said originally, this needs to be a statement game for the Mountain West. The Rams need to win this game against UTEP to show where we stand, we being the Mountain West, because I'm a Mountain West guy, within the G5 relevance. So I pull this out just because we got to see a Ram victory in that game against another Group of 5 opponent. September 28th, we've got Air Force at Wyoming this year. You remember last year Wyoming went down to Air Force and just got slobber knocked after they were having a really nice season. They got demolished down at Air Force. So I'm anxious to see what happens here. Air Force at Wyoming a little bit earlier in the season, September 28th. And another huge one here, September 28th, Fresno at UNLV. Really anxious to see what the Rebels have here at quarterback moving forward with Maeva moving on. They do have a much more of a running game coming into this next year, I think, than what they had last year. So a really big game in the Mountain West. Fresno at UNLV there at the end of September.
I'm going to make another early prediction.
Okay, what do you got?
Air Force at YO. It's at Wyoming, correct?
It's at Wyoming.
Okay.
Always hard to play up there.
Yes. I'm going to say the winner of that game has about a 90% chance of playing in the conference championship game.
Ooh.
And the loser absolutely will not play in the conference championship game.
Okay, all right. That's interesting. Steve, I've never been to Laramie. Laradice.
Ooh.
I'm eyeing up that game.
What's the date on that
as
one?
a
Let me write that
potential
down.
September 28th as a potential trip for JY's first trip to Laradice. We'll see what happens.
Okay.
All right. Let's go to October 5th. Again, a bit of a week I don't want to say weak, but there's just no games that really stuck out to me as like highlighters. I'm going to pull two teams that I'm not going to talk about very much because it's a chance that I can, and it's San Diego State. Now I'm talking about the Aztecs going to Hawaii, and we're going to see what happens here at San Diego State this year. You know, Hawaii, not a great team overall, but San Diego State just massively underwhelming last year. I'm anxious to see what happens there. And again, when you travel to Hawaii, the rainbows can bite you there. You know, ride the rainbow into a loss is what you can do when you travel to Hawaii. So I got October 15th. I got the Aztecs and Hawaii as my game to watch for right now.
Might be playing to not be in last place in the Mountain West.
Who knows? I don't know. I'm anxious to see what happens here with the Aztecs. Let's go to October 12th. We've got Washington State at Fresno State. I think this could be a very, very good game. I'm going to get, by the end of the episode, I'm going to tell you the two teams that I think have somewhat weaker schedules overall, in my opinion. And one of these two teams is going to be on that list. Washington State and Fresno State. But I do like this game, especially at Fresno. I think they're going to be massively up for this game to play against the Cougs. The Cougs returning quite a bit of players. We just did an episode that they're even surprised. They were even surprised that they were able to maintain a lot of these players. Not many went to the transfer portal. Big test for the Bulldogs, but I'm really anxious to see that game on October 12th.
Got a question for you and maybe another prediction.
Okay.
Mikey Keene back. He's back next year for Fresno.
He's back in Fresno. Okay. He's a Bulldog.
So this is my prediction. If Fresno can run the table in the Mountain West and get that spot in the playoff, everyone's going to look at that game and say that's where they did it. That's where they earned it.
There you go. All right. Well, I like that idea. We'll talk about the Bulldogs again, Steve.
Okay.
October 19th, I'm going back to the Rams. I got a lot of CSU here early on and the Falcons. So you got to pull this. When you got, Colorado State traveling to Air Force. I don't know how many miles apart they are, but they aren't very far apart. A little bit of a rivalry here, obviously. They're in state. So October 19th, I really like this game. Colorado State at Air Force. That one really stuck out to me. Let's go to October 26th, a rematch of the Mountain West Championship game. Boise State traveling back down to UNLV to see what happens there. Again, a big game for Boise here. They've got to almost run the table if they want to make it into the national spotlight. And I think the Mountain West has a few teams that can do it. I know I've said that about Boise here a couple times. There's a few teams I think that can do it, and Boise's being one of them. So I'm anxious for that, the championship rematch. And then, of course, November 2nd, Air Force at Army. I got to pull that one out. And they had that massive slip-up last year against Army. Just blew me away, that game. So anyway, we'll see what happens when they play them this year. Getting into November here, I just did the 2nd. We'll do the 9th. Fresno at Air Force, another one. Really looking at Air Force this year to see if they can continue what they did last year without kind of losing steam by the end of the season. This could be a big game for both teams. When you have to travel to Air Force, that's a hard place to play, a little bit like Wyoming. So November 9th, I got the Bulldogs going to the Falcons. November 16th, of course, I've got to pull up the Border War, Wyoming. This year going to Colorado State. Always a great game between these two teams. It's one of the biggest rivalries that they have here in the Mountain West. There's several, but this is a big one. November 16th, mark it down, the Border War. November 23rd, I got two. UNLV at San Jose State. This is getting down towards the end of the season. These were, this is where the whole debacle came, or where San Jose State, they should be in it, and UNLV was in it, and they got pissed off. So we'll see. They get to play each other here at the end of the year in November 23rd. We'll see what happens. And then also
settle it on the field.
Settle it on the field. That's right. November 23rd, San Diego State at Utah State. Another one I think that could be really, really good. At that point, I think one of these two teams, San Diego State or Utah State, is going to take a step back up into the upper half. Is it going to be the Aztecs or is it going to be the Aggies? I kind of like the Aggies getting there here next year, but we'll see what happens. Then the last week, November 30th, big one here, Steve. Oregon State at Boise State. Huge game for the Broncos. If things go as planned for them, this could be a win and you're in type of situation. A lot of games that have to be played before they get there, but a massive game to end the season here for the Broncos. And then another big one, Fresno, another team that I think could make that noise. They're at UCLA to end the season. So, of probably 2 of maybe 3 teams that I think have a legit shot at being in CFP discussions by the end. 2 massive games here. Boise State, Oregon State, and UCLA, Fresno.
Yeah. Great schedule. It's going to be tough because I kind of feel like the Mountain West, in order to get that spot in the playoff, that you almost need an undefeated champion and then have also another marquee win out of conference.
Right.
And it's going to be tough. You look at that schedule, a lot of good games on the schedule. And you talked about, the last one you talked about, what you said, Fresno State at UCLA.
Yep.
And earlier I made a point about that Fresno State and Washington State game, right?
Yes. Yep.
I think for them, that's kind of like a tale of, they have 2 opportunities out of conference.
Yep.
I think actually, because I think UCLA is going to struggle next year.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Washington State may end up, even though it's maybe a smaller name than UCLA, might end up being a little bit more important, but they have a chance with UCLA to make a statement. And Boise, I feel like it's kind of like their season is bookended.
Yeah.
They have that chance at the beginning of the season to kind of make a statement, and then also they have Oregon. I mean, that's just that's just rough.
Right.
But what was their last game there towards the end?
Oregon State for Boise State?
Yeah, Boise State and Oregon State.
Yep.
So bookended between let's go down to Georgia Southern if they can get. If they don't go and win at Georgia Southern, I think they're eliminated, unfortunately. Yeah. So that's one of those, like, you lose and you're out.
Oh, yeah.
And then I like your phrasing for that last one. If they're the Mountain West champion and they win this game, win and you're in, I like that kind of bookended for the Boise State season.
It could set up that way at the last week for both of those teams. Yeah. A lot has to go right for them. Lot has to go right for them, but it could set up that way. So I want to talk about the 2 teams that I think honestly have the easiest-ish schedules. And the Bulldogs come to the forefront here. They don't play Boise. They don't play Wyoming. They don't play San Diego State. They don't play Oregon State. So of the 2 teams of the pack that they play Washington State here. And I'm not sure which of those teams is better or worse necessarily. We're going to find out. Oregon State had more issues with transfer portal types of things and coach issues. But man, if you're Fresno and you don't have to play Boise, you don't have to play Wyoming, you don't have to play Oregon State, it sets up pretty nice. Now, they do have some tough games, no doubt about it. They've got, that UCLA game at the end. They got Michigan to start off, so that's going to be hard. But once they get past the Michigan game, if they can run that table to the end, things could be looking good for them. And Air Force, no UNLV, no Boise in conference. Again, they don't have enough there, especially out of conference games and stuff to make a national championship game. That's not the type of team that they are, but they kind of stuck out as a bit of a, at least in conference, a little bit of a weaker schedule than maybe some of the other teams have. So wanted to throw that out there. That's not a knock on the Bulldogs at all. I'm not knocking them, just looking at their schedule.
I really think that the schedule sets up for a couple really interesting narratives that to me involves 4 teams. I feel like you have, I said that, the winner of the Air Force and Wyoming, I really could see the winner of that game being that just kind of gritty, tough team in the Mountain West that finds a way to get into the conference championship.
Yeah.
And then you've got Boise and Fresno are those, to me, that they're maybe a little bit more glamorous. They've got some chances on their schedule to make some noise, get some national attention.
Yeah.
Both of them last year had some slip-ups in their schedule. Fresno was a completely different. When Mikey Keene went out, was injured, they were a completely different team. They had some losses that just, were a little bit of head scratchers unless you really just kind of look at, well, Mikey Keene was out, they're just not the same team.
Yeah.
And Boise had some head scratchers. So I see everything setting up as, which one of those teams can make that run, can get that national attention, and just, get through unscathed versus, a tough team in either Air Force or Wyoming in the Mountain West Championship. And it sets up, I think you have a couple really good contenders that could fight for that at-large or the G5 college football playoff spot.
I agree. I think there's some here. A lot has to, for anybody to get that spot, a
Yes,
lot has
a lot
to
has
go
to-
right
yep.
for them, right? Not necessarily lucky, but they got to almost run the table. So
Yeah.
there are some schedules set up, I think, to give the opportunity
Yes.
to do that in the Mountain West.
And to me, that's Boise, number one, clear cut, but I think Fresno has the opportunity too. I have a hard time seeing, and I know you love YO, and I love Air Force, but I have a hard time. Outside of those two teams, I have a hard time seeing anyone else getting that spot.
I think the other ones that possibly could would be the step children, which is Oregon State and Washington State.
Well, as an at-large,
as an
yes,
at-large,
yes.
as an at-large. So, I'm sorry, yeah, you were talking just the
G5
championship.
spot,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I agree. Hey, this thing came out. I went, oh my goodness, we got to get an episode out here because we are Mountain West and Big Ten focused. So that's where we sit. Hey, just as a reminder, we're going to be doing live episodes Wednesday evenings. First one's going to happen next week. I believe that's the 13th, if I did my math correctly. 8, 9, 10. Yeah, 13th is going to be a live episode. Please come on, say hello to us. We're going to be focused on the Mountain West and the Big Ten for those live episodes. You can come with some Q&As, give us a hard time, give us a hello, whatever you want. With that, hey, remember to like this episode, subscribe to the channel. We'll see you guys next time on the Big Mountain.